Hello DHS staff and welcome to the Google Forms training. This video is going to go through the basics of Google Forms, the different types of questions, add-ons that you will need to use this year, and then tips and tricks on how to use them. Now I know some of you are veterans and have used Google Forms before, so if you already know what you're doing, go ahead and skip ahead to minute 20 and you will pick up from there. You do need to go over the add-ons that we'll be using this year and how to use them. See you at the end! Let's begin with Google Form Basics. Once open, the first thing I want to review is my settings. Here, the only thing selected under General is going to be to restrict users. If this is an assessment, a quiz, check for understanding, I might want to limit this form to only one response per student. Now in this particular page, I do not change any of the other settings. However, because I am going to make this a quiz that auto-grades, it will collect emails from students. However, this happens in the background, not as part of the form. Under Presentation, I have options to show a progress bar, shuffle question order, and have a confirmation message. Now, shuffling question order can come in handy. However, when we go over the different types of questions, I will tell you when you do not want to turn this on. Under Quizzes, this particular form is not set up to auto-grade. Because I do want it to auto-grade, I'm going to go ahead and turn on to make this a quiz. Now the options that I am given. The first one is a walk mode. I want to draw your attention to it because we will not be able to use this. In my class, I do have students using Chromebooks, so I can use this feature. What this does is to apply a safe mode browser to my quizzes. When students open my quiz, they are not able to open new tabs. If they exit the quiz to go to another browser, it automatically sends me an email. However, because we do not know what type of devices our students will have, you need to make sure this is not selected because it only works on Chromebooks. Under grades, I have two options. I can have grades submitted immediately when students submit the form, or later, which if you are using short answer or paragraph answer questions, you will need to select. Under responses, I allow students to see missed questions. However, I do not allow them to see correct answers. Because I use the same Google form for multiple periods, I don't want my correct answers to be floating around campus. At any time, if I want to see what my students are seeing, there is a preview eye here, which I can select. The next icon is to customize my form. Here I can change colors, or I could add a banner. Google does have preset images that you can use to set as a banner. However, I have created specific banners for my quizzes and forms. If you would like to know how to create these, just let me know. Now it automatically selects a color from the banner to use for the form. In this case, it selected the brown. I don't particularly like it, so I can switch it back to the purple, or I can customize a color here. Before continuing, I want to show you some add-ons that I have already loaded, which will be needed for this year. Add-ons are the last icon up here. You will see that I already have quite a few of them. In order to get add-ons, you're going to go to the three-dotted snowman, scroll down to add-ons, and install these. You can see that it tells me I have already installed a few of these. I will show you how to use the ones that you need this year. We will specifically be using a few of these add-ons. You need Form Timer and Form Limiter, and I will show you how to use a few of the others in case you want to use them. Now, to begin creating my form, the first thing I need to do is to give it a title. You will notice that this title will also switch to appear once I click on it. It tells the students that this form is automatically collecting addresses. This is done in the background. Students do not have to type in an address. And now I can begin adding questions. Rather than create each question individually, I already have a sample quiz which I will walk you through. Let's take a look at the specific settings for questions. When I click on the plus button, I automatically generate a multiple choice question by default. However, Google is pretty intuitive, so if I say name, it changes it to short answer. If that is not the question, I've made a mistake, I can simply delete it. Once I ask my question, I provide answers. I want to select the correct answer here. I select the answer to be correct, and I assign points for my question. If I would like to leave specific feedback for this question, I can do so here. Select Done. I can duplicate this question if I am doing a type of vocabulary and want to use the same definitions for answers, and duplicate it, change the vocabulary term, change the correct answer, move forward. You will notice that since I have two questions, each worth 1 point, my total points for this quiz has changed up here. It would automatically change for you. Now that we've seen the basics of a setup, let's look at each individual question type. Let's go over the different types of questions that you can use in Google Forms. If you've taken a training with me before, this might look very familiar. The first thing I want to point out is that I like to divide my longer assessments into multiple sections. So you can see here that this is section 1 of 2. In this case, I have my demographic information in section 1, and then my quiz questions at section 2. When students view this, here's the sample. My demographic information is on one page, and I have to click Next to see the quiz. For my demo information, I choose to use short answer questions and a drop-down question. Even though Google Classroom collects their names and their email addresses and everything is linked, I like to ask students for their first and last name. That's because when I open the sample quiz Excel sheet that goes with this, I want to be able to reorganize students by last name, by period, so that I have easier time locating a student's score and looking at the answers that they had. Now, if you are going to use short answer in your actual assessment, you can have an answer key. However, the answer has to be exactly the same as what you mark as correct. What I mean by that, it has to be capitalized the same way, spelt correctly. If they used lowercase letters and you used a capital, it'll mark it wrong. If they used a space before or after and you didn't, it'll mark it wrong. It becomes very difficult to insert the correct answer. I typically do not allow Google Forms to auto-grade these. I leave them for manual grade for later. If you're going to have a much longer explanation, we could use a paragraph, but I'll show you later how you can use that type of question. In this particular first section, I also asked for the period. Again, it's for organizational purposes. I could use either a multiple choice or a checkbox question, but I prefer to use the drop-down menu. And that's to make my form look cleaner. In the student view, you can see that in order to select the period, the student uses the drop-down menu. Once selected, they can go to Next and not switch this. If it were a multiple choice question, my form would be much longer. Most students are going to use the up and down arrows, but you'll notice that if I do that, I'm actually changing my answer, and I'm actually clicking on my arrows on my keyboard at the moment. So I don't want students to do that, so by making it a drop-down menu, it's shorter, they're going to see the next button and hit the next button. Now these 3 questions, again, are by preference. Google Classroom is going to collect their names for you. All right, so moving on to my quiz. This particular quiz is on advisory, and I have a first question here using a linear scale. So my question asks, is advisory helpful for keeping student grades up? You can strongly disagree or strongly agree. The form allows you to choose the range of numbers you want to place and then a message next to each of them. For an answer key, you could select an answer feedback for it, but you're only really assigning it points because this is their opinion. There's not really a right answer. The next type of question, multiple choice grid. You can see that it looks very different when I open the question to edit versus what it looks like for the student view. So the students will see, rate the following as most helpful or least helpful. And I've seen people use this to do like vocabulary. They put the definition on the one side and the words on the other, so then they could match worksheets means neither, and so forth. There's multiple ways to kind of use this particular question. This particular question, you can see here, requires a response in each row. So students would be prompted to answer each individual row, but they won't be able to leave them blank. This next question I'm showing you, you might use this to set up a Google Meets time, what day or time best fits for students. It's automatically set up in your forms down here with date and time. So if you wanted to know what's the best time to set up a general meets with your students for a tutorial, you can kind of send out a survey that asks that. The next question I have is a multiple choice. Very familiar with this type of question. But I want to point out a couple of things now that I have an actual question. So here under my answer key, I've selected that nothing is most helpful as the correct answer. I've added 2 points for its value. I could add feedback. Now for any type of multiple choice question, I always like to shuffle my order of options. That means that every student is going to get a different order of the answers. Possible answers. There is the option in the settings to shuffle the questions. I will show you later on why you might not want to do that. But if you have just multiple choice questions, you can shuffle the questions and the answers for each question, which means that every student would get a different version of your quiz, and that might help with some plagiarism or copying going on. It does work for other questions, such as the columns. It will shuffle the row order. Now, if there are multiple correct answers for your question, you can use a checkbox type. This allows me to put in answers and select more than one correct answer under the answer key. So I've selected that stressful and unclear are the correct answers for how do you feel about advisory. It's worth 2 points. Now, the last time I did this training, the system could not divide points. But with the new update, I'm very happy to say that if you assign 2 correct questions and you assign 2 points to this question and a student only answers 1 correctly, they will get 1 of the 2 points. So before you had to go back and manually do this. If it was worth 2 points and they got 1 wrong, it would mark the entire question wrong. Now, as long as you have the same number of points and correct answers, it will split the points up between the correct answers. So very excited about that. Now, this is one of the reasons why I would not use the shuffle questions. So in this case, I have inserted a poem that I want students to read, and I have done that by inserting a text box here. So rather than insert a question, it's simple, a text box. I insert the poem that I want them to read, and then my next question is a paragraph question asking what do they think the last line of paragraph meant. This type of question, again, I would go back and manually grade because it's very difficult to assign a correct answer. But if I select the option in my settings to shuffle the questions, then these are going to be misplaced. So my poem would end up in one part and my question would end up in another part of the form, and they wouldn't be able to see those together. So if I have this type of setup, I don't want to shuffle questions. I would shuffle the answers for some of my other questions though. Now you can also insert pictures in your questions. So this particular question is actually a multiple choice, but rather than just have the question, you can see that right next to it is a image icon. When I select that, it's going to prompt me to browse for a photo. I can do this from my Google Drive, from my pictures, or I can do a Google image search so that it's just like going to Google and looking for pictures. So we're just going to type in flowers and voila, we get the same image search from Google and we can select our image that way. You can also do that with your answers. So if instead of having the species image as the question, I could add 4 images of 4 different butterflies and ask them to identify the correct species. To do that, I have it here right next to it. There's an add image for the answer. So I am just going to pick one so you can see this process. And I by no means say that this is the correct one, but I could have what species, which of the following is blank species, and have 4 different pictures. So this could be really helpful for identification. In science, I could maybe use this with equipment, which of the following items is the pipette, for example. For my language teachers, how are you going to get questions with audio? Well, this is a little bit limited, but it's a good way to do some audio questions. So I can insert a video and have students play the video and then ask them questions about the videos. I'm actually going to go into the preview mode to show you this question. And it's a YouTube video. Unfortunately, I can't use other videos. It has to be a YouTube video link that you insert. But this is a French cartoon. So I can instruct students to view a section of this video, the whole portion if I wanted them to, and then ask them questions. Pourquoi Bernie a parti a quitté Cornine? He left him at the park, so why did he leave him at the park? So this would be able to get that type of vocabulary and audio with distance learning. The limit that it does have, and you have to be careful with, is it is a YouTube video, so if you see all these yellow dots, it's all the commercials that are going to come up while they watch this video. Again, it's a little bit limited, but you can play around with it. The type of question here is the short answer question. So the last question type that I have is a checked box grid. And this checkbox looks a lot like the multiple choice grid. However, it does look a little bit different in the student view. So in this one, they can answer they can select the same answer for multiple rows. So if I was doing this as a survey and I didn't want them to have the ability to select the same option in a column like this, I would be able to do so. The multiple choice grid doesn't allow them. So if I select most helpful here, I wouldn't be able to select it for reading materials. I would have to select one of the other two. So if you're doing vocabulary and you want to kind of help the students out where they can't select the same answer twice, then you would use multiple choice. By using this checkbox, I can select the same definition, for example, for all of them, and that might be what you want them to be able to do. So that brings me to the end of my form, and you see here that I have this do not modify official purpose banner. This is going to be part of the extension form timer. To recap, we have gone over form basics and the different types of questions. If you skipped ahead, welcome back, because now we're going to be adding add-ons. All of you are going to be required to use 2 of these for assessments. The others are ideas, helpful tips that you might or may not want to use. To add an add-on, we're going to come here to our 3 dots, our snowman. Scroll down and find add-ons. You can go through the list and select different add-ons. Specifically, we're going to be using form limiter and form timer. You can search through the menu, or you can type it at the top. Once found, you can install. I have already installed these, so they show up as installed. As you can see here, there are other options. However, these are the 2 that I have found most helpful and easiest to use. Once they have been installed, I can find my add-ons by coming up to this puzzle piece, add-ons, selecting, and electing it from the list. Specifically, this year, we are asking teachers to use form timer and form limiter. The others, I will go through and show you ideas of how they might be used, tips and tricks, but they are not necessarily required. So the others are choice eliminator, form notifications, and Hypatia. If you are a math teacher or teach physics, science, where you're going to be using formulas and equations, you must download Hypatia. It is going to save your life. As an example, I'm going to their help page, and you can see here that it creates a way of inserting equations into Google Form. I'm not going to show you how to use it because I'm going to link the app's training video directly to our assignment. So at this time, I recommend you pause the video and go download these add-ons so that you already have them, and don't forget to do so. In the next couple of sections, I will show you specifically how to use them and give you ideas for different types of forms, not just assessments or quizzes, which you might be interested in using. Assessment or test security is going to be a concern for us with distance learning, so we have asked you to download 2 different add-ons, this form timer and form limiter. They work a little bit different. I'm going to start with timer because I do have it enabled in this particular form, and I want to show you all the different parts of it. So if I hadn't already put it in, I would come up here to my add-ons, I would select form timer. I want to configure. Now, I did practice this with a few of my coworkers, so I have some data to show you. I gave them 10 minutes allotted time to take it. And at the bottom, I just have a gray background. And I have requested that this exam time out at the end. I could allow students to continue to test. For example, if I have a 5-4 plan or some type of accommodation that allows students to take more time, I can make it to where the test does not close. However, you might want to assign a specific assessment for your SPED or accommodation students, and I'll show you that in another section. For security purposes, we want the test to end. So I have selected it to end, and I will hit save, and that will configure my form. Now I want to show you what this looks like. Because this is a preview, it's going to give me a identification code. So this is their name, identification name. This isn't what it looks like with a student view. I will show you what that looks like in a minute, but this is what students would see when they click on the link. It says you have 10 minutes to take this timed assessment. Do not share your link because it's unique to yourself. When they hit start, it does take a few seconds. It's not as automatic. You can see right away I have a banner at the top and it's starting to count down my time. So as I'm going through the assessment, I have this reminder at the top that I need to finish within the next 9 minutes or my assessment will shut down. So to send this to students, there is a share button next to save. And this does send an individual link to each student. So you wouldn't post this form onto your Google Classroom, you would email it to your to your students. You do not need to input every single student's email. You can if you select people. However, you're going to want to create Google groups. And we did go over this in CT last year. Other departments, if you need help, we can help you with this. But basically, you can assign a Google Groups. This is my advisory from last year. And so if this form is going out to them, I could just select advisory class, share to group, and every student would get an individual email that tells them they have to take this assessment. So let me go here. This is what the student view would look like. They receive this email and it tells them that they need to accept this invitation to take this assessment. So I wouldn't use this for every single form's assignment. This would be for my unit exam, not necessarily for a quiz or a check for understanding. So I don't want to do this 3 or 4 times a week, but I might want to do this at the end of the week for my formal assessment. So to see the results of my students, I go back to my form. I go back to add-ons, select form timer, and here I have open responses. So this is going to show me the responses for the form timer. So this isn't the student responses on the quiz, this is the form timer responses. So it's going to open an Excel sheet that looks like this. Now you can see here these assigned IDs. This is my preview. I've done it a couple of times, but you also see that I've had my coworkers help me out and test drive this. So I gave them instructions so they could kind of help me out. You can see here that the first 4 submissions, they took between 3 and 6 minutes to complete. However, you can see here that Ms. Barallardos opened her quiz, but she did not actually close her assessment. So this assessment timed out and closed on the student. If I had selected for the assessment to continue, it would have told me how much time she actually took to answer the assessment, but I did have it for shutdown mode. So you see there's no responses here. These aren't the grades that my students received. This simply shows me who did it on time, who closed it, how long they took to take the assessment. The section that we want, or the feature that we want, is giving the students that banner with the timer and the assessment shutting down. So if a student were to go to the link and click on it again, it won't let them in. My responses are still in my Google form and my grades are still here. So it doesn't affect the grades. This is just to limit the time students have. Set a timer. I apologize, because now I'm going to tell you about form limiter, which is a little bit different. So I do have the two extensions, form timer and limiter. So the timer gives me a timer, they take 10 minutes, shuts down. The limiter limits how long the form is available for students to take. So I can send this form or post this form on my Google Classroom, and I can schedule it to post at 8 a.m. on Monday. But I want to limit how long this form is available for students to answer. So I might want all of my students to submit an answer by 3 p.m. because this is the assignment for Monday and it needs to be done by 3 p.m. or 5 p.m. Google Forms and Google Classroom do not allow me to have a time to shut this off. I can set a schedule time for it to appear in my Google Classroom, but I don't have a way to make it turn off. That is where this form limiter is going to come into play. So I select form limiter, and I'm going to set a limit. So I've already posted this in my Google Classroom. I've posted it to open on Monday at 8 a.m. And I am going to select a day and time when it's going to close. So I would select Monday again, and I want it to specifically close by 5 p.m. And I set it. Hit save and enable, and that's going to create that limit of time. Now, as the teacher, you are going to get a notification in your email that the form has closed. So I already did this, and I received the email that the form was set to close at this time, and then once it closed, it reminds me that it has already closed, so I received this email. So I could do this for things like check for understanding, specific assignments that they have to get done on Monday or Tuesday because we have a quiz on Wednesday. I can limit the form. There's a second way that you can limit forms, and that is by simply going to responses and turning it off. So you no longer are accepting responses, but you manually have to go in there at 5 p.m. and disable the form. The limiter does it for you. So you can schedule it to post at Monday at 8 a.m. and you can schedule it to close Monday at 5 p.m. I could do that now and not have to worry about it for Monday. It's automatically going to post to my Google Classroom and it's automatically going to close at 5 p.m. You may choose not to use the timer or the limiter and simply come in and select not accepting forms. Now that you have seen the different types of questions available for us in Google Forms, let's go over a couple of ways that we can use Google Forms that you may not have thought of. For example, office hours. Imagine trying to schedule office hours with parents or students and trying to figure out what time is best for them to meet with you. Well, we can create an office hours form which eliminates appointment times so that you don't have to go back and forth with parents and students. They select the time that best works for them. So I have here a pre-started form for my office hours. You can see that I've given it a title, and I have a little message that this form creates a schedule for one-to-one meetings with me and what to do if there are no longer available times. The first thing I want to do is change my settings. By default, it's going to have a restriction to DUSD users only. So I want to deselect this as my parents are not part of the district. I do want to collect email addresses, and I would like my students and parents to receive a copy of this form so that they know what time they scheduled an appointment with me. I also want them to receive a message confirming their appointment with me, and I have already typed it in. So now that that is done, I'm going to hit save, and my settings are ready. You will see that it automatically added an email address request. The next question I want to ask is for a name. I'm going to leave it general because this might be a student or a parent. I always want to know what period the student is in, whether it's the parent or the student completing the form. So my next question is actually going to be, what period are you in? But since I use this question all the time, I am just going to import it from another form. I can select the question here, what period are you in? So I don't have to type this question over and over and over. Now for the important question. I'm going to give them directions. Now I'm going to give them the options. I have decided that Wednesday afternoons are going to be used for these one-on-one meetings, and I want to schedule them between 1 and 2. And I'm going to provide 15-minute slots for these one-on-ones. So copy and paste these so I don't have to type them over and over. Oops. So that brings me to 2 p.m. Now that my question is set up, I am going to use my add-on to eliminate choices. So I come up to my puzzle piece, click, and select Choice Eliminator. What this will do is once the appointment has been set, that option will be eliminated for the next form. I'm going to configure it. And I get this note from the author. My question is a multiple choice. The author suggests that you use a drop-down type question. On the right-hand side, you will see the 2 questions that are available for the choice eliminator. I don't want to eliminate periods, but I do want to eliminate the time slots. So I will select the question and activate the choice eliminator. And this will take a couple seconds to create. Once created, I'm done. So let's take a look at how this form works. Preview. I'm going to go ahead and fill this out with a fictitious address. And be prepared for students not to use their correct name. But because they're selecting the period, I can figure it out. Now you notice there are the 4 time slots, and Martita wants to schedule for 1:15. Hit submit. And you see my confirmation message has appeared. But let me show you what this choice eliminator actually did. So if I select to submit another response, or if I click the link from the original Google Sites, when I scroll down and look at the time slots, 1:15 is no longer there. So you can see this will save a lot of time in order to schedule your appointments. To see my appointments, I'm going to go back to Google Form. And under Responses, I'm going to open the Google Sheets for this Google Form. And you can see here that Martita has scheduled an appointment for 1:15. Now on Friday afternoon, when 3 o'clock rolls around, I can delete the entry of appointments for this week, go back to my Google Form, under Responses, select Individual, delete all the responses, and reset my question. In order to do that, we scroll back down come to my question. I reopen Choice Eliminator, configure, in the settings bar, I can restore all choices. And I'm going to go ahead and go in and change the date for all of my choices. I don't have to relink this to my Google site. I simply reset it at the end of my office hours every week. Another idea that I have for you is to have contact forms. This one is my parent-guardian contact form, but I plan to have one for parents and one for students. In the past, I have struggled with students emailing me from their personal emails and forgetting to tell me who they are, or what period they are in, or they place the question in the subject box. By creating a form, I can require specific information to help me answer student questions or parent-guardian questions. Here are the questions that I have selected to place. I am collecting emails, asking for the parent's name, a phone number where they can be reached, the student's name, the period the child is in, and then provide a paragraph type question for them to type in their message. The settings on this form, I want to make sure that I remove the restriction, collect emails, and select response receipt. I have an example of this so that you can see. This is what a parent would receive for their receipt. It is a copy of the form and the message that they sent me. The second thing I want to change or include under presentation is a thank you for contacting me note. Finally, I want to receive an email every time my form is completed. That way I know that a parent or student has reached out to me. So under responses, under the snowman, I want to make sure that the get email notification is selected. By default, this feature is not selected in Google Forms. When a new form is filled out, I will receive an email letting me know that I have a new response. By clicking here, I can access the response. The purpose for me having this contact form is to have all parent contact under one single location. In order to access that, I'm going to go to Responses and open the Google Sheet associated with this forms. And I can see all the responses from parents. To make this easier to view, I can come to the name column, organize it by alphabet, and see all the form completions done by Miss Little Randy Walker's mom. What I want to be able to do is add a column at the end of this sheet for teacher's notes. This column will only be visible to me and not part of the form. But here I can make comments as to what I responded to the parent and what the outcomes of my suggestions were. This way I can quickly see all contact with Randy's parent and my suggestions and outcomes for the parent contact. It's in one single form, which I can print and submit for my parent contact at the end of the year. Congratulations, you made it to the end of the training. In this training, you should have learned how to start a Google Forms from the beginning, different types of questions that you can use, add-ons that we will need you to use, some extras, and a few tips and tricks that you might try out. This particular training was not created in one sitting. As you can see, there's multiple sections. I used Screencastify and then edited the sections individually. To end, I used Windows Movie Maker to create one flowing video. As always, if you have any questions, please be sure to write these down. Tomorrow, in our in-person section, we will go over any questions that you might have. Please bring some sample questions that you might want to include into a form that we're going to build together. This way, if you get stuck or have questions, I will be there to help you. or desparallar those in the cafeteria. Thank you for listening, and hopefully you learned something new today. Have a great rest of your evening.